When the HOA president's text message buzzed at 6:03 a.m. on a Sunday, I already knew something stupid was about to happen. Karen never messaged early unless she was planning to announce something that ruined my day. Community pool party. Today at 2 p.m. The message read, followed by a dozen emojis that looked like a stock photo of fun. There was only one problem. The community pool was mine. As in, built on my property, maintained by me, and legally separated from the HOA when I opted out 2 years ago. I stared at the text, waiting for the caffeine to kick in, thinking maybe I was hallucinating. Then I scrolled down and saw the attached flyer. Annual HOA Summer Bash. Hosted by President Karen. Free entry for residents, snacks provided, music, kids welcome. It even listed my address and, my stomach twisted, my Wi-Fi name as the official party network. I wasn't even angry yet. Just impressed. Karen had somehow decided she owned a pool she'd spent months calling tacky. The same woman who once reported me to the city for installing solar-heated water lines, visible from the street. By 8 a.m., I was sipping coffee by the pool, watching the morning light shimmer across the water I personally paid to heat to a perfect 84 degrees. My neighbor, Todd, wandered over with his usual nervous grin. "You see the group chat?" he asked. "She told everyone it's a community event." I nodded. "And you told her it's not?" Todd hesitated. I didn't want to start something." Classic Todd. The HOA's unofficial mascot of cowardly diplomacy. At 9, Karen appeared in her signature pink tracksuit, clipboard in hand, and sunglasses the size of teacup saucers. "Good morning," she sang, stepping directly through my gate without so much as a knock. "Just checking the area before guests arrive." I stared at her. "Guests? Oh, everyone from the community. We'll keep it neat. I even booked a lifeguard." I set my mug down slowly. "Karen, this pool is on my private property. There's literally a fence separating it from the HOA grounds." She smiled like a kindergarten teacher explaining colors to a toddler. "Technically, the property line is under review. The board voted that shared amenities should benefit everyone." "Funny," I said, "because the county assessor's office says otherwise." She laughed lightly, tapping her clipboard. "Let's not get legal. It's just a friendly get-together. I'll handle everything." She walked off before I could reply, already barking orders at 2 teenagers unloading coolers from her SUV. By noon, folding tables, speakers, and a cotton candy machine occupied half my backyard. A banner stretched between my palm trees read, "HOA Summer Splash 2025. I watched from the kitchen window as a dozen people trickled in. Parents with floaties, kids with goggles, retirees holding Tupperware. Every time I stepped outside to protest, someone greeted me cheerfully, assuming I was part of the event staff. Then Karen commandeered my grill. She wasn't even subtle. She turned on the propane, adjusted my tools, and started arranging burger patties like she owned the place. "You're welcome to join," she shouted over the music. "We have veggie options." I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, video clips, the whole show. Because if Karen wanted to pretend this was her event, she'd soon discover what real ownership looked like. At 2:30, the pool area looked like a resort commercial gone wrong. Kids screamed on floaties, adults splashed cheap beer into the water, and someone's Bluetooth speaker was competing with Karen's rented DJ. My once peaceful backyard now smelled like sunscreen and entitlement. That's when the first argument broke out, between Karen and the delivery driver bringing pizza. She hadn't paid for her order. "Put it on the HOA account," she snapped, waving her clipboard. The driver just blinked. "Ma'am, there's no HOA account. You ordered this under your name." "Same thing," she barked. He refused to hand over the boxes. She turned crimson, tossed a $100 bill, and stormed back toward my deck. I stood by the sliding door, arms crossed. "Having fun." She ignored me, fiddling with the pool heater control panel. That's when I realized she didn't even know how it worked. Careful, I warned, that's a gas line system. You break it, you buy it. She scoffed. Relax. I know what I'm doing. She didn't. 10 minutes later, the heater error light was blinking red, and she yelled at the lifeguard for not maintaining temperature properly. By 3 p.m., my patience had evaporated. I'd already called the non-emergency police line earlier, but the dispatcher told me it was a civil matter. Typical. So I decided to play Karen's game, just better. I walked calmly to the basement, where the pool system's main switchboard sat beside the water pump housing. I flipped the heater valve to manual override and cut the gas flow entirely. Then, for good measure, I set the circulation timer to idle mode. The effect was subtle at first. The music thumped, people laughed, kids splashed. But slowly, the surface lost its shimmer, replaced by faint ripples of cooling water. 15 minutes later, I heard it. The first shriek. It's cold, a child yelped. Then another. Why's the water freezing? Karen rushed to the edge, waving her arms. It's just a cloud, she declared, as if the sun were responsible for a 10-degree drop. Parents started climbing out, wrapping towels around shivering kids. Someone tested the water and muttered, "Feels like 50. Karen's confidence cracked like glass. It must be a malfunction, she said, glancing nervously toward the heater panel. I stepped outside with the most innocent smile I could muster. Everything okay? She glared at me. Your pool heater broke. My pool heater, I repeated slowly. Yes, that would make sense, since it's my pool. She started sputtering excuses. Look, we'll pay for the gas, maybe. It was for the community. Community? I gestured toward the retreating crowd. Looks like the community's leaving. By 4 p.m., the party had deflated into chaos. Half-eaten burgers, dripping towels, and empty soda cans littered the deck. Karen tried to rally the stragglers, insisting it was just a temporary setback, but no one listened. Parents carried their kids home, muttering about false advertising. The DJ packed up early, still waiting for his payment. When the last guest left, Karen stood alone, clutching her clipboard like a broken sword. You humiliated me, she hissed. You could have just said no. I tilted my head. I did. Around 8 a.m., she stomped toward her car, muttering something about board meetings and consequences. As her SUV rolled away, I surveyed the battlefield, plastic cups in the pool, chips ground into the patio, my grill left open. But under the mess I felt something unexpected, satisfaction. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I turned the heater back on, the soft whoosh of ignition echoing like a reward. The water temperature climbed steadily again. I poured a drink, sat by the pool, and watched the reflection of the fading light dance across its surface. Then my phone buzzed. Karen had posted on the HOA Facebook page. Today's event was sabotaged by a selfish neighbor who refuses to support our community spirit. We'll be filing a formal complaint. I smiled, scrolled past the comments, half confused, half supportive, and drafted my own response. Correction. Private property. Trespassing. Expecting a complaint? Perfect. I already have photos. I didn't hit send yet. Because this wasn't the right move. Not yet. Karen thrived on public drama. I thrived on quiet precision. And somewhere in that space between law and pettiness, I was going to make her wish she'd never touched my pool again. By Monday morning, the HOA Facebook page was on fire. Karen had spent the entire night posting updates about the sabotage at her pool party, each one more dramatic than the last. It was supposed to be a joyful day for our community, she wrote. But one selfish resident decided to ruin it for everyone by shutting down the heater and refusing access to shared property. She ended with a photo of herself, fake crying beside a pile of wet towels. I didn't comment, not yet. I'd learned long ago that silence drove her insane. The more she talked, the more she slipped up. Sure enough, by noon she posted again, this time bragging that she'd consulted legal counsel and that appropriate measures were underway. That was fine. Because I had something better than a lawyer. I had proof. The next day, I called the city zoning office. After a brief hold, a cheerful clerk confirmed what I already knew. The HOA's jurisdiction ended at the property line, 3 feet before my fence. The pool, deck, and even the access gate were entirely mine. I asked for an official property map and email confirmation. She sent both within the hour. That evening, I printed everything, highlighted boundaries, and slipped the packet into an envelope labeled, "Attention, HOA Board." Then I waited. Karen's power thrived on fear and confusion. She ruled through meetings, not logic. If I delivered this quietly, she'd twist it before anyone understood it. But if I delivered it publicly, she couldn't control the narrative. So I waited for Wednesday, the HOA's monthly open meeting. When I arrived, the clubhouse was already packed. Karen stood at the front in a floral blazer, basking in the attention of her audience. Her voice carried that syrupy tone of manufactured authority. "We need to address the behavior of a certain resident who disrupted a sanctioned community event," she said, shooting me a smile that could curdle milk. I sat calmly in the back, arms crossed. The room buzzed with whispers. Karen launched into a slideshow, actual slides, of the pool party. Photos of children splashing, Karen flipping burgers, people laughing. Then, a photo of me standing near the sliding door, arms folded. "As you can see," she said, "our resident chose to observe rather than participate." Then, halfway through, the heater mysteriously failed. A man in the crowd asked, "So you're saying he shut it off?" "I'm not pointing fingers," she replied sweetly, "but certain individuals refused cooperation when asked. That was my cue." I stood, holding the envelope. "Madam President," I said, "may I share something with the group?" Karen's smile froze. "We're not taking questions yet." "This isn't a question," I said, walking forward. "It's documentation." I handed the packet to the board secretary, then turned toward the crowd. "This is the official zoning record from the county. It clearly shows that the pool is on my property, outside the HOA's authority. Meaning the so-called community event was hosted entirely without permission." The room went silent. Karen stammered, That's just a technicality." "Funny," I said, "because technicalities are what property law is made of." Laughter rippled through the room. The board members exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a gray-haired man named Stewart, leaned into the microphone. "Karen, did you get permission to use his property?" She folded her arms. "It's for the benefit of the community." "He's being unreasonable." "Unreasonable," I repeated. "You brought 50 people onto my property, damaged my heater, and left garbage everywhere. And now you're calling it unreasonable, that I didn't like it." The meeting dissolved into chatter. Karen tried to restore order, but the momentum had shifted. Stewart cleared his throat. "Until we resolve this, I think it's best the HOA refrain from using private property without explicit consent." Karen's face went pale. Afterward, as people filed out, several neighbors approached me quietly. "Didn't know she didn't have permission," one said. Another muttered, "Honestly, good on you." Even Todd, timid as ever, gave me a small thumbs up. Karen, however, wasn't done. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hammering. I stepped outside and saw Karen directing 2 workers at the end of my driveway. They were installing a new sign, "Community Pool, Maintenance Under Review." I walked over. "What are you doing?" She smirked. "Just marking the property for clarity. The board decided we should re-evaluate the boundaries." "Did they?" I asked. "Because I just came from that meeting." "Verbal discussions aren't binding," she said, tapping her clipboard again. "Until the review's complete, this sign stays." I took a photo, said nothing, and went back inside. Then I called the same zoning clerk from before and explained the situation. She sighed audibly. "They're still doing this?" I'll send a certified notice of property verification. 2 days later, a city inspector arrived with a measuring wheel and a camera. Karen intercepted him before he reached my gate, plastering on her trademark smile. Oh, perfect timing. You'll want to start your measurements from the curb. He didn't even look at her. Ma'am, this inspection was requested by the property owner. That's me, she said quickly. He flipped his clipboard. Address, 1417 Willowbend. Owner, Daniel Reeves. He pointed to me, standing 10 feet away. That's him. Karen's smile vanished like vapor. The inspection took 15 minutes. The inspector marked the boundary stakes with bright orange flags and handed me a signed copy of the verification notice. There's no ambiguity, he said loud enough for her to hear. The HOA's jurisdiction ends right here. He pointed at the fence. Everything beyond belongs solely to Mr. Reeves. Karen's voice cracked. There must be some mistake. No mistake, ma'am, the inspector said, packing up. Any further encroachment would be a civil violation. She stood frozen as he drove off. That night, I found another post from her on Facebook. Some people think they're above community spirit. They hide behind paperwork and selfishness. The comments were different this time. More skeptical. People had seen the meeting. They'd seen the inspector. Karen's narrative was crumbling. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was how far she'd go next. Saturday morning, I noticed the pool pump making a strange noise. A dull rattle, then a whine. When I went to check, I found the maintenance panel open and the valve lever halfway unscrewed. My tools were still locked in the shed. Someone had tampered with it. I turned off the system immediately, but the damage was done. The circulation line was leaking. Water was seeping into the gravel trench behind the pump housing. For the first time, I felt real anger, not just amusement or annoyance, because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was sabotage. I called the police, filed a report, and handed over security footage from the night before. At 11:47 p.m., a figure in a pink jacket slipped through the gate. The timestamp, the motion sensor, even the sound, clear as day. When the officer paused the video, he raised an eyebrow. You know this person? Yeah, I said. That's the HOA president. He sighed. We'll document it. Can't promise much unless there's significant damage. That night, Karen texted me for the first time since the party. You're escalating this. I'm warning you, drop it before things get ugly. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Too late. Then I blocked her number. But I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about that open valve, about how close the leak had come to the gas line that powered the heater. One more turn, and she could have blown half the yard apart. So I started planning, not out of spite but out of precision. Karen wanted to play with control? Fine. I'd give her the illusion of it. Just long enough to trap her in her own arrogance. Because this wasn't about a pool anymore. It was about power. And I was about to make sure she never had any over me again. By the time the police report was filed, Karen had shifted into damage control mode. The HOA Facebook page was wiped clean. No posts, no pictures, no trace of the community pool debacle. But the silence itself was telling. Karen only went quiet when she was planning her next move, and I could feel one brewing. The pool repair cost me nearly $2,000, and I kept every receipt. The technician shook his head as he replaced the cracked valve. This wasn't wear and tear, he said. Someone forced it. Too much torque. He glanced up. You sure you don't want to install cameras closer to this system? Oh, I will, I said. Soon. For the next few days, the neighborhood felt tense. People didn't wave as much. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Todd, ever the diplomatic messenger, stopped me by the mailbox. Karen saying you faked that security footage, he muttered. That you edited it to frame her. I laughed. That's creative. She's calling an emergency HOA session tomorrow, he said. Claims she has proof you're lying. That got my attention. Proof of what? She'd already been caught trespassing, lying to the board, and tampering with property. What could she possibly have now? When I arrived at the clubhouse the next evening, the air was thick with gossip. Karen stood at the front, this time wearing a crisp navy suit instead of her usual pink tracksuit. She looked like she'd spent all night rehearsing her speech. "Thank you for coming," she said, her tone dripping with forced calm. "I've called this meeting to address false accusations made against me by a resident who has recently become hostile toward the community." She gestured toward a projector. A still image appeared, my backyard, shot from a distance. "This," she said, "was taken by a concerned neighbor the night before the alleged sabotage. As you can see, Mr. Reeves was in his yard near the pool equipment." Gasps rippled through the room. She clicked to the next slide, a blurry photo of me carrying a wrench. "This was at 11:45 p.m., she said dramatically. "He claims the system was tampered with at 11:47. Interesting coincidence, isn't it?" I almost laughed. "That's my own security footage," I said. "I was checking the pool because the heater light had been blinking for hours. The leak wasn't even visible yet." Karen smirked. "Convenient timing." I stepped forward, holding up my phone. "Convenient, yes. Because the next clip shows you walking through the gate 2 minutes later." I tapped the screen, and the video played on the TV beside her. Clear as day. Karen's pink jacket, her flashlight beam, her unmistakable silhouette bending over the same valve she'd accused me of tampering with. The room went dead silent. Someone in the back muttered, "That's her." Karen's face drained of color. "That's not," she started, then stopped. "This is edited. Feel free to request the original file," I said. "It's already backed up to the police report. You can compare timestamps if you'd like." Her composure cracked. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You're stalking me." "On my own property?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. A few board members exchanged looks. Stuart, the silver-haired treasurer, cleared his throat. "Karen, maybe we should let legal handle this before things escalate further." Karen slammed her clipboard shut and stormed out. The meeting ended abruptly after that. But as people filed out, their glances told me everything. The illusion had shattered. Karen's reputation, the thing she valued most, was slipping. Later that night, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a cease and desist letter drafted by the HOA's attorney, claiming I was defaming the president and disrupting community harmony. I almost admired the audacity. The letter wasn't even signed. It was just a scare tactic. So I wrote my own. I spent an hour crafting it. A formal notice outlining every instance of harassment, trespassing, and vandalism, each supported by documentation. I printed it on crisp paper, stapled copies of the police report, repair invoices, and photos, then slid it under her door at sunrise. That day, the power dynamic shifted completely. By noon, Karen hadn't posted, called, or shown her face. Instead, a new rumor spread that she'd taken a short vacation for her mental health. Which, in Karen speak, meant she was hiding. For a week, peace returned. The pool gurgled quietly, my yard stayed pristine, and the neighborhood's collective anxiety began to cool. But like all good storms, the calm was temporary. One night, Todd knocked on my door, eyes wide. "You should see this," he said, handing me his phone. Karen was live-streaming from her front porch. "The Truth About My Neighbor's Lies," the title read. She stood before the camera, holding a stack of papers. "He's been trying to humiliate me," she said, voice trembling with fake outrage. "All I ever wanted was to build community. But when you give some people power, they abuse it." She flipped through the papers dramatically. "Here," she said, "copies of his property maintenance violations." She held up photos of my trash bins, slightly out of place, and my hedges before trimming day. "This is the real story." The comments were brutal. Half her followers mocked her, half cheered her on. It didn't matter. The damage was done. She'd escalated it publicly again. I knew better than to respond online. Instead, I waited. Because I'd learned something crucial about Karen. She only understood consequences when they hit her in the real world. 2 days later, opportunity arrived in the form of a brown envelope in my mailbox, a letter from the utility company. Apparently, the HOA had been drawing power from my shared transformer for community lighting. I'd paid those excess charges for months without realizing it. My line item showed consistent overuse matching the HOA's streetlight schedule. I called the utility company. They confirmed the connection. It's an old setup from when the development was first built, the rep said. Technically, your property is supplying power to that line. We can disconnect it if you'd like, but you'll need to sign an authorization form. I smiled. Email it to me. That evening, as the sun dipped, the neighborhood glowed under warm amber lights, Karen's pride and joy. The decorative lamps she'd bragged about at every meeting. I filled out the form, scanned it, and sent it back. At exactly 9 p.m., the lights went out. A domino of darkness swept down the street. Porch lights blinked off. The HOA sign went dark. Even Karen's front yard, with its overdone landscaping and glowing fountains, vanished into shadow. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Todd again. Dude, did you lose power too? Nope, I said, sipping my drink on the lit-up deck. Just them. From across the street, I heard Karen's voice pierce the night. What's going on? Why are the lights out? Someone yelled. Didn't you handle the maintenance budget? I did, she snapped. It's probably his fault. I watched her storm toward my gate, flashlight bobbing. She stopped short when she saw the small metal sign I'd installed that afternoon. Private utility. Unauthorized access prohibited. She froze, realizing she couldn't do anything without admitting she'd been using my line. The next morning, I woke to an HOA group email titled, Temporary Lighting Outage. Karen tried to spin it as scheduled maintenance, but everyone knew the truth. My phone buzzed nonstop with private messages, neighbors thanking me, some even laughing outright. Karen didn't come outside for days after that. But I wasn't satisfied, not yet. Because while I'd cut her power, she still held sway over the HOA itself. If I wanted real peace, I had to remove her entirely. And that meant one thing, exposing what she'd done financially. I began gathering evidence, budget reports, dues summaries, contractor invoices. Most were public record under HOA transparency laws. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were discrepancies everywhere. Inflated landscaping costs, phantom consulting fees, missing receipts for community projects that never happened. Karen hadn't just abused her position socially. She'd been embezzling. When I showed the documents to Stuart, his face went gray. If this is true, he whispered, she's in serious trouble. It's true, I said. And we're going to prove it. Because if Karen thought cutting my pool heater was a power move, she was about to learn what real power looked like. Karen's downfall didn't start with a screaming match or a viral post. It started with numbers. Cold, traceable numbers that told a story even louder than her voice ever could. After a week of quiet investigation, I had compiled a folder thick enough to make any accountant sweat. Every receipt, every suspicious invoice, every payment marked miscellaneous community outreach had a pattern. The same contractor names repeated across different projects, always companies with generic titles like Premier Ground Solutions or Everclear Management. When I checked the business registry, they didn't exist. They were shell companies created by one person, Karen's brother. I wasn't surprised. Karen was the type who couldn't resist mixing her ego with opportunity. To her, the HOA wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about control, prestige, and personal gain disguised as service. The final piece fell into my lap by accident. While browsing the HOA's public site, I noticed a download link buried in a folder titled Archive, Q2 Financials. It wasn't supposed to be public, but Karen must have overlooked it. Inside was an unredacted spreadsheet showing every transaction from the past year. Over $18,000 had been funneled into her event management projects. I called Stuart. "You might want to check your email," I said, attaching the files. He called me back 20 minutes later, his voice low and tense. "This is bad. If this goes public, she's finished. The board could face liability too if we don't act fast." "That's why we do it by the book," I said. "Emergency audit. Board vote. Transparency notice." He sighed. "She'll fight it. I'm counting on it." 2 days later, the HOA board held a closed session. I wasn't invited, but Todd texted me updates from the hallway. "She's yelling," he wrote. Then, "They're calling for a vote." 10 minutes later, she stormed out. That night, the HOA Facebook page finally broke its silence. A single post from Stuart appeared. "Effective immediately, Karen has been placed on temporary suspension pending a financial audit." I didn't celebrate yet. Karen wasn't the kind to take defeat gracefully. Sure enough, the next morning, I found my trash cans overturned, my mailbox dented, and a flyer taped to my door that read, "Selfish Liar Ruins Community." The handwriting was unmistakably hers, tight, slanted, furious. I took a photo, filed another police report, and installed 2 new motion sensor lights along the driveway. But honestly, I wasn't even angry. Karen was unraveling, and I could see it happening in real time. Every act of pettiness only made her look guiltier. The audit began that week. The HOA's accountant, a quiet, methodical woman named Lila, started combing through every transaction. I caught glimpses of her from my kitchen window, carrying folders into the clubhouse. Karen, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. Then one evening, around dusk, Todd knocked again. "You might want to check this out," he said, handing me a printed screenshot. It was an email thread between Karen and her brother, leaked from the audit server. The subject line, "Reimbursements, make sure to delete old invoices." She was done. 2 days later, Lila submitted her report. $23,482 unaccounted for. Fake vendors. Duplicate reimbursements. Unauthorized expenses for pool event logistics. The board called another emergency meeting. This time, the clubhouse overflowed. Even residents who never attended showed up, whispering like spectators at a courtroom drama. Karen sat at the front, pale but defiant, flanked by 2 people who looked like lawyers but probably weren't. Stuart opened the meeting solemnly. "We've concluded our financial review," he said. "And we've found serious discrepancies." Karen leaned into her mic. "This is a witch hunt. A smear campaign by one vindictive homeowner." "Then explain this," Stuart said, holding up a document. "You authorized payments to a company registered under your brother's name." She blanched. That's a coincidence. He helps with logistics." "He's never been paid by the HOA before this year," Stuart countered. "And the bank statements show transfers to your personal account labeled reimbursement." Whispers spread through the room. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Karen's voice rose. "You think I did this for money? I did it for the community. Who else volunteers to plan events? Who else keeps this place alive?" Her voice cracked, not from guilt but from fury that her image was collapsing. I stood quietly in the back, hands in my pocket. She spotted me and glared like I'd set the world on fire. "This is his fault," she shouted, pointing at me. "He's been undermining me for months. He hates this neighborhood." I didn't respond. Stuart just sighed. "Karen, the evidence speaks for itself. The board is voting on immediate removal." When the vote concluded, 5-0, she didn't even wait for formality. She gathered her papers, shoved her chair back, and marched out. The door slammed so hard it shook the blinds. The room stayed silent for several seconds before someone started clapping. Then another. Within moments, the entire crowd was applauding. It wasn't joyous, it was relieved. I stepped outside into the cool night air. Karen's car was parked crookedly, headlights on. She was in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, eyes fixed on the dashboard. For a second, I almost felt pity. Almost. Then she revved the engine, peeled out, and disappeared down the road. The next morning, I found her final act of defiance. Someone had dumped chlorine tablets into my pool, way too many. The water was clouded white, the pH levels off the charts. It could have damaged the entire system if I hadn't caught it early. The security footage, of course, told the same story. The police arrived that afternoon. I showed them the video. Karen, hood up, tossing handfuls of tablets into the water at 2:11 a.m. They nodded grimly. "This one's not a civil issue anymore," the officer said. "That's criminal mischief and property damage." As they drove off, I finally exhaled. Months of chaos, manipulation, and sabotage, and it was ending not with shouting, but with paperwork. Later that week, Stuart dropped by. "You've got the patience of a saint," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. "The board voted to reimburse your repair costs and formally apologize. Also, we wanted to offer you something." Inside was a letter, an invitation to join the HOA board as community property liaison. I laughed. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "We could use someone who actually understands boundaries. Literally." For a moment I considered it. The idea of sitting in Karen's old chair, quietly maintaining order where she'd once reigned, had a certain poetic satisfaction. But then I looked at my pool, clear, calm, peaceful, and realized I didn't want to spend another second in HOA politics. "Tell them thanks," I said. "But I think I'll pass." He smiled. "Can't blame you." That night, I sat by the pool again, drink in hand, the water humming softly under the moonlight. For the first time in months, the neighborhood was quiet. No flyers, no meetings, no pink tracksuits marching through my gate. Just stillness. Then my phone buzzed with a notification, an unfamiliar number. The message was short. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the faintest chill trace down my spine. Karen might have lost her title, her influence, even her reputation, but something told me she wasn't finished. Not yet. The message, "Enjoy it while it lasts," sat on my screen like a stain I couldn't scrub off. There was no name, no emoji, nothing traceable. Just that sentence, sitting in my notifications like a whisper in the dark. I didn't respond. I didn't even show it to the police when they came by to update me on the chlorine vandalism case. The officer said they'd formally filed the report and were recommending charges, though he warned that minor property crimes often got dismissed. I told him I understood. Honestly, I didn't care about punishment. I wanted peace. But peace didn't come. The first incident happened 3 nights later. My sprinklers turned on at 2 a.m. sharp, every single zone, soaking my deck and patio furniture. I checked the control panel and found it switched to manual override. I hadn't touched it in weeks. The next morning, a package arrived, a cheap foam flamingo with a note that read, "Thought your pool could use some fun." No return address. I tossed it in the trash. By the 4th day, the real strike hit. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Todd had texted 6 times. "Bro, you need to check next door." My stomach dropped before I even opened the app. Karen was back. She'd created a new profile, concernNeighbor_K, and posted a rambling manifesto accusing me of harassing former HOA officials, filing false police reports, and endangering children by tampering with utilities. Her post had hundreds of views, dozens of comments, half of them supportive. The replies were what got me. I knew something was off about him. He always seemed cold. Typical loner energy. I felt my jaw tighten. This wasn't a smear campaign, it was a social ambush. I took screenshots of everything, time-stamped, and archived them. Then, against my better judgment, I commented once. "Hi Karen. Glad to see you're spending your suspension productively. I suggest you delete this before your lawyer calls me." Within minutes, the post vanished. But the damage was done. For the rest of the week, the neighborhood avoided me again. Kids stopped cutting through my yard on their bike. Even Stuart, who'd backed me through every step, grew oddly formal in his emails. The shadow of Karen's poison still hung over everything. Then came the power flickers. At first, I thought it was just a surge. But every time I turned on the pool heater, the lights in the house dimmed. When the technician arrived, he traced the problem to a tampered breaker relay. Someone had loosened the neutral line connection, just enough to cause instability without full failure. "That's not randomware," he said. "That's deliberate." I stared at the open panel, the faint smell of ozone hanging in the air, and something inside me hardened. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about safety. That night, I filed for a restraining order. It took 3 hours, 2 forms of ID, and a long conversation with a clerk who'd clearly heard worse, but when I left the courthouse, I had a stamped petition ready for the judge's review. Karen was about to find out what a real boundary looked like. The next morning, while I waited for the hearing date, I installed new security lights, motion detectors, and a 24-hour camera system wired directly to cloud backup. I even added a small, clearly visible sign: "Premises under video surveillance. Trespassers will be prosecuted." That sign would become the single best investment of my life. Because that night, at exactly 1:42 a.m., she came back. The footage showed her creeping down the side of my property, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. She moved slower this time, cautious, checking angles. She stopped near the pool heater enclosure, crouched, and snipped the lock. Then, just as she began to lift the lid, she froze. The motion light flared to life, flooding her in white. She looked up directly at the camera, eyes wide, deer in headlights. For 2 long seconds she just stood there, then bolted. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't joy or relief. It was disbelief that it had come to this, a 50-year-old woman sneaking around with bolt cutters because of a pool heater. The next day, I sent the footage to the police and to the HOA board, copying Stuart. No commentary, no accusation, just a link labeled, "Attempted trespass 1:42 a.m. By noon, the response landed. A terse message from the new interim HOA president, Lila, the same accountant who'd exposed Karen's embezzlement. "Thank you for forwarding this. The board will be submitting a formal statement supporting your restraining order. We've also voted unanimously to permanently ban Karen from all HOA functions and communication channels." That was the official end of Karen's reign. But unofficially? She wasn't done yet. That evening, I came home to find a small crowd gathered at the corner of the street. My stomach dropped when I saw what they were staring at: my fence. Across the wooden slats, in dripping red spray paint, were 3 words, big, uneven, unmistakable: "Pool thief liar." I stood there for a long time, the crowd murmuring, Todd shuffling awkwardly beside me. "We called it in," he said quietly. "The cops are on their way." I nodded but said nothing. The responding officer was sympathetic but unsurprised. "We'll document it as vandalism," he said, snapping photos. "Given her history, this adds weight to your case." He hesitated. "You might consider staying somewhere else until the hearing." But I wasn't running. Not from her. Not after months of manipulation, trespassing, and humiliation. I'd fought her by the book every step of the way, and I wasn't about to stop now. The next morning, the restraining order was approved. The judge's ruling was clear. Karen was to have no contact, direct or indirect, with me or my property. No physical approach within 200 feet. No communication. No digital harassment. I printed 5 copies, laminated one, and nailed it directly to the inside of my gate. For a few blessed days, peace returned. The weather cooled. The pool sat still under the autumn light, the surface reflecting quiet skies instead of chaos. I almost believed it was over. Then, one Friday afternoon, Lila called. "You're not going to like this," she said. Karen filed a counterclaim. I felt my jaw tighten. For what? Defamation and emotional distress. I laughed out loud. She broke into my property. I have video evidence. She's lucky she isn't in jail. I know, Lila said softly. But she's using her brother's firm. He filed it this morning. It's nonsense, but it'll delay everything. Karen's last weapon wasn't physical, it was procedural. She wanted to drag me through paperwork, hearings, and stress until I gave up. But she underestimated me again. Over the next 2 weeks, I built a counter case so airtight it could suffocate a lie. Every screenshot, every timestamp, every witness statement from Todd and Stewart. I even found the old surveillance from the pool party showing Karen's unauthorized entry. When my attorney saw the file, he whistled. You don't just want dismissal, he said. You want punitive damages. I want her to stop, I said. He smiled. This will stop her. The court date came 3 weeks later. Karen walked in wearing gray, hair pulled tight, her expression calm but brittle. She didn't look at me once. The judge read through the summary with visible annoyance. Ms. Hanley, he said finally, this is a frivolous filing. You initiated repeated harassment, trespassed multiple times, and caused property damage. The defendant acted well within his rights. He turned to me. Mr. Reeves, if you wish to pursue damages, the court will entertain your motion. I met Karen's eyes for the first time in months. No, I said. I just want her to stay away. The gavel dropped. Case dismissed. Karen stood there a moment longer, her composure flickering like a dying light bulb. Then she gathered her papers and walked out. No words. No glance back. When I stepped outside, the air felt clearer than it had in months. That evening, I sat by the pool again. Same chair, same drink, same quiet hum of the heater. The water shimmered under the lights, steady and calm. I almost forgot what chaos looked like. Then I noticed something on the far edge of the pool deck. A single pink hair tie. It must have fallen from her the night she broke in. I picked it up, rolled it between my fingers, and tossed it into the trash. Whatever game she thought she was playing, it was over. Or so I thought. Because 2 weeks later, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. And next to it, parked right by the curb, was a moving truck. But something about the timing didn't sit right. No realtor's name. No company logo. Just a plain white truck, idling. And as I watched from my window, a man climbed out, then glanced directly at my house before heading up her driveway. Something told me this wasn't just a move. It was the beginning of something else. The moving truck stayed parked in front of Karen's house for 2 days. No one in the neighborhood saw her leave, and no one saw anyone move in. Curtains stayed drawn, lights stayed off. Just a silent, white truck sitting at the curb like a sentry. By the third night, I started feeling that familiar unease again, that static hum in the air that always preceded one of Karen's schemes. I told myself it was paranoia. She'd lost everything. Her position, her power, her reputation. What could she possibly do now? At midnight, I found out. The first sound was a faint hiss from outside. I muted the TV and listened harder. A rhythmic spraying, like someone using a hose. I stepped to the window and peered through the blinds. There was a man in a dark jacket near my fence, spraying something from a canister. I flipped on the floodlight. The man froze, caught mid-motion, before bolting toward Karen's property. The truck's door slammed, the engine roared, and it sped off into the night. When I stepped outside, the smell hit me immediately. Strong, chemical, sharp. Someone had sprayed solvent across my fence panels, melting the fresh paint right off. I grabbed my phone, took photos, and called the police. By the time they arrived, the truck was gone. But my cameras hadn't missed it. The footage was grainy under the floodlight, but the license plate was visible enough. The officer nodded. "We'll run it." An hour later, I sat on my porch, the faint reek of solvent still hanging in the air, when Todd texted me. "Heard the truck's gone. You okay?" "Fine," I replied. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't gone at all, that she was orchestrating things from behind the curtain, using someone else to act for her. The next morning, that suspicion became fact. Lila called me early. "We got an anonymous letter at the HOA office," she said. "It accuses you of harassment again. Same handwriting as the flyers. The postmarks from 2 towns over." "Let me guess," I said. "Return address?" "None," she replied. "But the stamp, same brand as the ones Karen used for the HOA mailers." She sighed. "Daniel, I think she's trying to bait you into reacting. Don't give her anything." I thanked her, hung up, and looked out at the fence. Sunlight glinted off the streaks where the paint had bubbled. It looked ugly, raw, and half-burned like a scar. So I decided to fix it. But not quietly. That weekend, I invited the neighborhood over for what I called a property reclamation barbecue. It wasn't about revenge. It was about flipping the narrative. For months, Karen had painted me as the enemy of community spirit. So I gave them community without her. Todd helped set up the grill. Lila brought lemonade. Even Stuart showed up with a cooler of beer. The atmosphere was awkward at first. No one knew how to act without Karen policing every detail, but once the burgers hit the grill, people loosened up. We laughed. Kids splashed in the pool again, this time with permission. For the first time since the chaos began, the place felt like a neighborhood instead of a battleground. Around dusk, as the last guests were leaving, I caught a flicker of movement from across the street. A curtain shifted. Just for a second. Karen's house looked dark, abandoned, but that movement had been deliberate. I walked to the curb, staring across. The white truck was gone, replaced by an old silver sedan. The curtains fell still again. That night, I sent the latest footage to the police, along with the new car's plate number. They promised to look into it. But I already knew what they'd find. Nothing. Karen was too proud to move away completely. She'd lost control, so she was trying to reclaim it from the shadows. But her biggest mistake was thinking I'd still play defense. Because by then, I wasn't reacting anymore, I was planning. I started with the security upgrades. A new, tamper-proof perimeter alarm tied directly to my phone. Then, a small wireless camera mounted discreetly near her old property line. Nothing illegal, just ensuring that if she or her helpers tried anything again, I'd have instant proof. For 2 quiet weeks, nothing happened. Then, one Friday night, the sedan disappeared again. At 3:17 a.m., the alarm pinged, a soft chime on my phone. Zone 3, rear fence line. I opened the live feed and froze. Karen herself stood there, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, her face pale under the beam. She looked thinner, worn out, like someone unraveling from the inside. She was muttering to herself, words lost under the hum of crickets. I watched her cut the same lock she'd broken before, step through, and kneel beside the pool heater enclosure. And that's when the floodlight triggered. She shrieked and stumbled back, tripping into the grass. I stepped outside before she could recover. "Evening, Karen," I said calmly. She whipped around, eyes wild. You think you can just take everything from me?" I kept my distance. "You're violating a court order. You need to leave. You stole my community," she hissed. "My friends, my home, everything I built." I nodded toward the camera blinking red above us. "Keep going. The police will love this monologue." For a split second, her face flickered between fury and fear. Then she lunged, grabbing the gate handle like she could somehow pull the world back to how it used to be. That's when the siren went off. Loud, piercing, automated, the new system I'd installed. Within minutes, blue lights washed the street. Karen froze, trembling. "I just wanted to talk," she whispered. The officer who stepped out of the cruiser wasn't the same as before. He recognized her immediately. "Ms. Hanley, you're under arrest for violating a restraining order, trespassing, and destruction of property." As they led her away, she didn't resist. She just stared at me, her expression hollow, the fire finally gone. The next morning, Todd knocked, holding coffee. "So, she's really gone this time?" "Yeah," I said. "She's facing real charges now." He nodded slowly. "You handled that better than anyone else would've." Most of us just avoided her. That's what she counted on, I said. Everyone avoiding conflict. That's how people like her win. He looked around my backyard, the neatly repaired fence, the shimmering water. Guess she finally lost. I smiled faintly. No. She just ran out of games to play. Over the next few weeks, things finally normalized. The HOA, under Lila's leadership, cut dues by 15%. Meetings actually started ending on time. The atmosphere shifted from tense obedience to cautious cooperation. Karen's house sat empty for months, her car repossessed, her mail piling up in the box. The bank eventually took it. When a young couple moved in that spring, the neighborhood welcomed them with open arms. One Saturday afternoon, the new owners stopped by. "You're the pool guy everyone warned us about," the husband joked. I laughed. "Something like that." They seemed kind, quiet, respectful, grateful. I helped them adjust their sprinkler system and even lent them some tools. As I watched them unpack, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time: closure. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I sat by the pool again. The heater hummed, the lights reflected off calm water, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence meant peace, not tension. Then Todd wandered over, beer in hand. "So, what's next for you?" he asked. "You've beaten the HOA boss battle." I chuckled. "I think I'll just enjoy the quiet for a while." He nodded. "Fair. But hey, if you ever host another pool party, I'll bring the grill." "Only if the president approves," I said dryly. He laughed, and for once, the sound didn't echo off bitterness. It felt genuine. When he left, I leaned back, watching the stars ripple across the pool's reflection. For a long time, I thought the fight had been about property, boundaries, justice. But sitting there, in the peace I'd fought for, I realized it was about something simpler: control. Karen had needed to control everything: her image, her neighbors, even my water temperature. And I had needed to prove she couldn't. The entire war had been a tug-of-war between two people terrified of losing control. Now, with her gone and the night quiet, I finally let go of the rope. Just before I went inside, I caught a flicker of movement across the street. Lila's motion sensor light tripped, probably by a cat. But my heart still skipped a beat before reason caught up. That instinct, the one Karen had drilled into me, would take time to fade. I shut off the patio light, walked inside, and closed the door. The house was silent. For the first time in months, I slept without checking the cameras. And outside, under the calm hum of the pool heater she'd once claimed as hers, the water stayed perfectly warm.